Hello everyone, my name is Meghan LeVota, and today I would like to be discussing with you all how to integrate your ego and the shadow, and how can we use our personality type as a tool in order to do that. So Carl Jung is the guy that we know and love that came up with these 8 cognitive functions that are the basis to Myers-Briggs personality theory, which separates them into 16 types. What some of you may not know is that Carl Jung also had a theory about individuation, where it was about bringing conscious awareness to your subconscious. And essentially, it's about you can pull what is unconscious up into the conscious to become a more integrated person. And I use the terms subconscious and unconscious interchangeably. Some people disagree with that. Welcome to have your own views on that, but just wanted to clarify that I wasn't meaning 2 different terms. And Carl Jung's not the only one who talks about this. There are, especially when it comes to New Age spirituality and New Thought spirituality, there's this whole idea about the shadow. And if you're into New Age stuff at all, I guarantee you that you've heard of the shadow. And people define it differently. But I'm going to be sharing with you all how I've come to understand the term the shadow. I know that Myers-Briggs really just talks about your top 4 functions. It's Socionics, the Russian personality tool that is also inspired by Carl Jung, that really goes in deep to how you use all 8 functions as opposed to just the ones that are conscious and valued. So there's a lot of different theories that have been sparked by Carl Jung, not only when it comes to personality, but when it comes to making the unconscious conscious. And I, sort of wish he was alive today, because I would be so curious how he feels about some of the more popular new age ideas of the law of attraction and manifestation, and how you're supposed to use your shadow in order to get what you want and all that. There's a whole, I'm not even going to go into it in this video, but I guess I just want to make it clear to you that I'm not the only person who's talking about this. This is just my unique perspective on all of this. And there are other personality theorists out there that have different ideas on the shadow and whether or not we should be developing the shadow functions. Should you be focusing on your inferior at all? Do we even have conscious access to the functions that aren't in our stack? So here's how I think about it. I think that the ego that we have, it is just what we have chosen to attach to and identify with. So therefore we are conscious of the ego. And the 16 personality types, so if you were to look at the psyche and split it into 8, there would be 8 types of ways of thinking or ways of processing and judging and perceiving what's going on. So if somebody is a thinker, that means that the brain process that they like to use is the one that is in charge of logical thought, logical reasoning parts of your brain. And Dario Nardi has a lot of work on the neuroscience of this, so you can go check out that as well. But and if you are a feeler, you are going to cognitively process feelings in your brain. And so it's all cognitive. That's what the whole theory of the 8 cognitive functions are about. It's about how you process with both perceiving and judging. So it's not about what you do. And most of the tests out there are about what you do, whereas in reality, the theory we have of the 8 cognitive functions don't care what you do. It's about how you process. And so, just as it's your psyche is divided into 8, your personality, there's 16 key personalities that are these archetypal patterns of the brain and how you like to process. It's like the route, like, oh, I start here and then I go there. And there's this idea of neuroplasticity where we can recreate the wires in our brain. But as far as the state of human consciousness now, as we know of, there are like 16 key patterns of how people like to process. And it's just, it doesn't hold you back as to who you can be. It just shows what pathways are the most embedded in your brain and how do you prefer to use. So if you were to think of like when you're born, if your soul like went into your body and your soul had an intention of how you wanted to live your life, it created this pattern of cognition in your brain that you preferred, that you, whatever you believe spiritually, whatever reason why you believe we're here, something in you, somewhere, somehow, wanted to be your personality type based on whatever goals you have or whatever, what have you. It's of use for you. You picked it for a reason, and you can use your personality to get what you want in life. So, sorry, I got distracted there for a second. So what I'm really wanting to talk about is that you were born with a personality to help you. But consciousness could go a lot farther beyond what it is that you just prefer to do. If you are in autopilot, then you are just using your dominant function. And judging by the state of human consciousness right now, a lot of advice that people give when we're talking about personality is they're encouraging you to use your auxiliary function. They're saying to use your second function just a little bit more. And that's good advice. You really should be using your second function a little bit more. What advice is going to work best for you doesn't just have to do with what your personality is. It also has to do with where you are on your journey, what life experience, how that has shaped you. And it is just so much more complex than that. And your ego is going to attach itself to your top 4 functions, and those are the ones in your stack. So your first function is your autopilot. Your second function is your growth key. It is the function that helps you grow. And most people, that's where their advice stops at. They say, oh, this will help you grow, and they stop that. The third function is one that your ego likes to attach to whether or not you actually are doing the work to improve it. So your ego is attached to it either way, no matter how skilled you are at that thing. And then your inferior function, your ego is very attached to, even though you might not really prefer to use it. When people judge you about doing a bad job in your inferior function, you're going to take that to heart because your ego is really like associated with it. On the other hand, your bottom 4 functions that your ego's not attached to, that's what I call the shadow. And the reason it's the shadow is because when we use these functions, our ego does not prefer to attach to them. So the functions are at the bottom 4 of your stack. When we look at other people using those functions, we don't see that as us. We see that as them. And we think, that's bad. Like, I can't believe that you are acting that way. I can't believe that you are XYZ. Like, let's say if you're an FJ, if you were to view an FP who is feeling their own personal emotions, the FJ, unless you've done conscious work on yourself pulling this out, the FJ won't really know what they're feeling. They have that shoved into the subconscious. They don't use that information to make decisions. Extroverted feeling will prefer to maintain and then also create new in the external environment, as opposed to really assessing their identity, what they personally feel. And so if an FJ has their FI completely shoved in the shadow, they're going to notice all the flaws with other people using it, because if you have denoted in your mind that something is other from you, it becomes a lot easier to criticize it. At the same time, when your ego has decided that something is you, it becomes a lot harder to find the flaws in it, and so we can get super biased in that perspective and not realize that there is another perspective. And so that's how I see it, is that with your personality, you have 4 functions that your ego loves. The top 2 you just sort of do without thinking. The bottom 2, you should work on a little bit more, because whether or not you have worked on it, you are gonna still take it personally if somebody comments on that thing. But then the bottom 4, it's like, so for me as an ENFJ, FI and NE, since I am an NF, feeling and intuition is something that I care about and I do a lot of. So for me, I am way more likely to have FI and NE just sort of going on in the background that I'm not conscious of, but other people might perceive that from me, because as an NF, like, I understand intuition and feeling. I'm a very emotional person. So even if I'm not consciously using my FI to make a decision or to process, other people are likely to still see when I'm using FI, because I still use it quite a bit. Whereas SI and TE are functions that I don't really use, and I also don't really care about, and it's also super easy for me to see all the flaws in the people using it. So what does it mean to integrate your shadow and to integrate your ego? To integrate your ego is to really fine-tune how you're using all the functions. There is no right or wrong answer. Every person is going to have their own feeling about how to do this, but it's pretty much conducting this individuation process. Why was I here? Why am I here on earth? What am I here to do? And how can I use my ego to help me out? How can my personality help me get where I want to go? And what a lot of people are doing is they're saying, okay, I'm an ENFJ, I'm good at FE, so I guess that means I should do FE things, right? Like, I guess that means I should be a teacher or a mentor or whatever. When really, you are you, no matter what parts of your personality you are focused on. You have a brain that can do whatever. You could think and feel however you want. You can see things however you want. And that's why really, really healthy people that have reached greatness in their life, are so hard to type, because chances are they've had to do something where they never thought that they would go. They had to really exercise a part of themselves that did not come naturally to them. And on the other hand, people that are in a really hard place, they often act out and their shadow comes through. And so people that are in a really dark place, or people that deal with mental illness, they also can be really hard to type because they might be acting out of character, or there might be a personality disorder that is sort of taking over what the preferred personality would want. So, and I'm not a mental health professional, so I don't have strong opinions about that. It's just a factor to consider, because my thinking is that if you did have a mental health issue, you probably are going to act a little bit different than what the stereotype of your type is. So, integrating your ego and your shadow is all about becoming conscious of the different parts of you. And the idea that I believe is that when you shine a light on the unconscious, oftentimes that's all you need to do. Oftentimes it's just the awareness. It's not as hard as it seems. Like, you don't have to stop being who you are and turn into a different type of personality in order to get where you want to go. Just being aware that, for many people, when they realize that they are a certain type, that awareness alone helps them to really see their strengths and be aware of their weaknesses. Some people, what they do that I think is harmful is they double down on their strengths and they make excuses for their weaknesses. They say, oh, well, I'm a thinker, and so I don't have to care about your feelings. Or they say, well, I'm an extrovert, and so I don't have to introspect ever, and I shouldn't have to. The reality is, no matter what your personality type is, if you're a human being and you're living life, all 8 of the cognitive functions, whether it's in your shadow or whether your ego likes to attach to it, you are responsible for it, regardless. And your life will reflect that to you. For example, I'm an ENFJ. I'm really great with people. I have a really good time forming relationships and keeping my connections and having them realize how I care about them. I also really enjoy empowering people, and I'm a very driven person and a natural leader, and I like helping people and all that. And, that's why I'm offering a mentorship, which I was going to talk about more at the end, but I am offering a mentorship package specifically to help people integrate their ego and their shadow. So that's sort of what I'm doing. I'm sort of explaining my process to you all right now. So I want to do that, right? Like, my FE is like, oh, I want to help people. And then my NI strategizes how to do that. And then my SE is like, okay, I'm going to push it out there, and I'm going to like be myself and embody myself. And then TI is like, okay, well, I'm going to think through all the ways this could be wrong and really like hone in on what my truth is. The reality is, even though introverted sensing is my blind spot, I still am responsible for it. I still have to feed myself. I still have to sleep. I still have to figure out when I need to renew the license on my car. It doesn't matter how intuitive you are, you still have to do that. And that's the reality. Like, if you're an INTJ and you really don't like FE, that's fine. You don't have to live your whole life being like this kind, inspirational Mother Teresa sort of overly FE person. But if you want, love in your life that your FI probably wants, you're still responsible for figuring out how to communicate with your loved ones, even though extroverted feeling is hard for you. So let's say if you are an INTJ, you shouldn't be using FE in the same way that an ENFJ is, but you're still responsible for the extroverted feeling in your life. And if you talk to an INTJ, you'll know this. You'll know that even they learn in relationships that just having a feeling about their partner often isn't enough to keep them around. That's the reality. And like, for me, even my TE is not that great. I have to figure out how to communicate my thoughts, or it doesn't matter. I could be the most genius person in the world. I could have been studying this stuff more than anybody else, but if I can't figure out how to communicate my thoughts to you all or to everyone else, it doesn't matter how smart I am. It doesn't matter how much I know. It doesn't matter how right I am either. I have to craft convincing TE argument, or else nobody cares. And so that's the reality with integrating your ego, is that if you're an FE user, integrating FI into your life isn't all of a sudden becoming an FI user. It's just being aware that that exists. So let's talk about FE and FI for a second, because no matter what type you are, one of those is going to be something that your ego loves to identify with. If you're an FI user, you're going to be like, oh, I'm so authentic. I always know my feelings, and I always know how I feel, and I always do what I want because I'm that sort of person that does what I want. And then FE, you're going to be like, oh, I am so self-sacrificing, and your ego loves to realize all the things you've done to make things better for others and all that. And these are obviously two extremes and two generalizations, but that's just the feeling of your ego just like loving the idea of being that thing. So if you're an FI user and you know exactly what you want to do, if people don't care, it won't matter. If you can't make them care, it won't matter. You won't get to do what you want. And if you're an FE user, you can realize that everybody wants you to be this way and you can figure out how to meet their needs. But at the end of the day, if you can't sleep at night, at the end of the day, if you haven't found inner peace, you're the one that's going to have to reckon with that. And so that's the reality, is that's why becoming conscious of all of your psyche, becoming conscious of not just your ego, not just integrating your ego, but also becoming conscious of your shadow. And for me, if I were to become conscious of SI as an ENFJ, that doesn't mean I'm all of a sudden going to quit my job and become an accountant and say, oh, I'm so detail-oriented on my resume. It's not what I'm going to do. I'm going to maximize my strengths and be aware of my weaknesses, because at the end of the day, what I would love to do is make a name for myself and make a life for myself where I could use FE and NI all day long and hire out people or lean on people to help me with the SI and the TE. And that's what we all want. We all want the freedom to be able to use our functions the way we want and not have to do the things you don't want to do. But in order to do that, you can't ignore those parts. You have to be aware that they exist. And being aware of your weaknesses doesn't mean you have to change who you are. It just is being aware of them so that you can be more on the lookout for them. But most of us live our lives as though we don't have weaknesses. We're afraid to go down there. But when you integrate your shadow, you're aware of what that weakness is and you bring it out. You shine a light on your weakness. So if you're interested in me helping you through this process, I have a link below. I'm seeking 5 people to work with as mentees for this mentorship program in the month of July. And I am going to be keeping this limited and capped, so you will have to apply in order to get it. But you'll be on a waiting list if for some reason I don't have time for you, because it's going to just depend. I'm new to doing it this way, so I'm going to have to figure out as I go. And this will be sort of on a revolving door cycle. So just want to let you know that. And so some of you are going to be completely ready and willing to go through with me guiding you, your entire ego and your shadow. Some of you just want to focus on shadow. Some just want to focus on ego. And also, if you need help figuring out what you even want to do with your life and how to forge your own path in a way that has nothing to do with your personality, but really like aligning with you as a person, as a holistic person, then we can do that as well. Or like just maximizing your strengths or zoning in on your weaknesses. The way I have the application is I want you to sort of tell me where you're at, and then I can sort of recommend to you what I think would work best. And I also, if you're wanting to work with me and that sounds fun for you, I do have student discounts, because I recognize that a lot of people that watch me and a lot of people that are the people I would enjoy helping, because I was just in your shoes a few years ago, are students. So, and I don't want to break the bank. I want this to be as affordable as possible. But the thing is that when you fill it out, if you're curious, and even those of you who don't feel called to I'm gonna be making more videos. Sorry guys, the video is sort of cut out there. But even those of you who don't feel called to, I am going to be making more videos in the future about this whole process of shadow and ego integration. So don't think that I'm just like trying to put all my insight behind a paywall. Like, I truly just want to help people that want to be helped by me. And if you fill it out and let me know where you are right now in life, you can either pay up front or in chunks. So, but I sort of just want to know what sort of commitment and investment you want to make so that we can gear the conversation toward what it is that you want. So that's linked below. And yeah, those are generally my thoughts about the shadow and the ego. If you have any questions, please comment below because I would love to go into this more. I just would like to know what parts, if any, were confusing, so I know how to explain this even more. But thank you so much for watching, and for those of you who support me and subscribe to me and have seen me grow and see me grow into this understanding, I appreciate you more than I know how to say. So thank you so much and have a wonderful rest of your day.